The easiest way to underestimate someone is to judge what they drive instead of what they have already built. Every morning, Marcus Bennett pulled the same dark gray pickup truck into the employee parking lot behind a small office building outside downtown Charlotte. The truck had cost a little over $40,000 when he bought it new 3 years earlier, and aside from regular maintenance, he had never felt the need to replace it. It started every morning, carried everything he needed, and reminded him that good decisions usually lasted longer than expensive impressions. Marcus believed there was nothing embarrassing about owning something reliable. Unfortunately, not everyone shared that opinion. Alicia Bennett certainly did not. At first, she had joked about the truck whenever they met friends for dinner. Then the jokes became comparisons. Before long, every conversation somehow turned into what other husbands drove, what other neighborhoods they lived in, and what other vacations they could afford. Marcus rarely answered. He had learned that arguments almost never changed opinions already built on appearances. That Saturday afternoon, they arrived at a neighborhood barbecue hosted by one of Alicia's coworkers. Luxury sport utility vehicles and imported sedans filled the driveway and lined both sides of the quiet suburban street. Marcus parked his pickup at the far end of the curb beneath a large maple tree. He climbed out carrying a bowl of homemade potato salad, while Alicia remained standing beside the truck for a moment with an expression that made him pause. "Do you know how this looks?" she asked quietly. Marcus glanced around. "Like we arrived for lunch." Alicia sighed. "Everyone else is moving forward. We are still showing up in this." She tapped the side of the pickup with the back of her hand before walking toward the house. Inside the backyard, conversations paused just long enough for several guests to notice the truck parked down the street. One man smiled politely and asked Marcus whether he used it for construction work. Marcus simply smiled back. "No, it just gets me where I need to go." Alicia laughed softly before taking a sip from her lemonade. Marcus thinks a pickup is all anyone really needs. A few people chuckled politely. Someone mentioned a new luxury electric vehicle. Another guest described upgrading to a six-figure performance sport utility vehicle. Alicia listened with obvious interest before looking toward Marcus again. "Some people enjoy staying comfortable," she said. "Others actually want to succeed." Marcus met her eyes without changing his expression. Comfort and success are not always the same thing. Alicia shook her head. "That is exactly why we never see life the same way." The conversation moved on, but Marcus noticed several people quietly studying him as though his truck explained everything about his ambition, his career, and even his future. None of them knew that by Monday morning their assumptions would already be outdated. Later that evening, after they returned home, Marcus placed his keys in the ceramic bowl beside the front door and plugged his phone into the kitchen charger. Alicia went upstairs without saying goodnight. The house settled into complete silence. A few minutes later, his phone vibrated once. The message came from Naomi Carter. "Congratulations. The acquisition has officially closed. Every ownership document has been recorded. The dealership is now yours." Sunday morning arrived with clear blue skies over Charlotte, and Marcus Bennett followed the same routine he had kept for years. He poured fresh coffee into his stainless steel travel mug, picked up the keys to his pickup truck, and drove across town while most neighborhoods were still waking up. The truck rolled smoothly through quiet streets before turning into the parking lot of a modern office building where Naomi Carter was already waiting outside, with a slim leather portfolio tucked beneath her arm. She greeted Marcus with a warm smile instead of excitement, as though the biggest transaction of the year was simply another item on Monday's schedule. "Everything has been recorded with the state," she said as they walked toward the entrance. The ownership transfer became official at 8:42 last night. Marcus accepted the portfolio without opening it. "Any unexpected issues?" Naomi shook her head. "None. Every signature has been verified. Every payment has cleared. The dealership is completely yours." Marcus thanked her and continued walking toward the conference room overlooking the Charlotte skyline. Large windows filled the room with morning sunlight. A single folder rested neatly at the center of the polished table beside a silver pen. Naomi opened the folder and reviewed the final documents one last time. "Tomorrow morning the staff will be informed before business hours. Richard Coleman believes the new owner will arrive sometime after the opening ceremony. He has no idea who purchased the dealership." Marcus smiled faintly. "Let us keep it that way." Naomi nodded. "The announcement schedule remains unchanged." Employees, department managers, local business partners, and a few automotive reporters have all accepted the invitation. Marcus closed the folder and looked through the window toward the city below. Good. They deserve to hear about the future directly. Nearly an hour later, he left the office carrying nothing except the same travel mug and the same pickup keys he had carried every morning for years. Nothing about his appearance suggested that his responsibilities had changed overnight. That afternoon, Alicia spent nearly 2 hours browsing luxury vehicle websites from the living room sofa, while Marcus quietly prepared dinner in the kitchen. She looked up from her tablet only long enough to turn the screen toward him. "Look at this new luxury sport utility vehicle," she said. "People who are serious about success drive something like this." Marcus glanced at the photograph before returning to the vegetables he was slicing. "It looks nice." Alicia sighed. "That is all you have to say?" Marcus smiled politely. "If someone enjoys it, I hope it serves them well." She lowered the tablet with visible frustration. "You never want more." Marcus rinsed the cutting board beneath warm water. Wanting more and needing more are different things. Alicia shook her head as though she had heard the same answer too many times. "Tomorrow I am stopping by the dealership after work. Everyone says the mysterious buyer is supposed to make an appearance. Maybe I will finally see what real success looks like." Marcus placed 2 dinner plates on the table without responding. A few seconds later, his phone vibrated once beside the salt shaker. Naomi had sent a short message containing only 6 words. "The staff has been asked to assemble." Monday morning brought steady sunshine across Charlotte, and the dealership looked more like the site of a community celebration than an ordinary place of business. Bright balloons lined the entrance. Fresh coffee waited on a long table beside trays of pastries. Local business leaders, department managers, longtime customers, and several automotive reporters gathered near the showroom, all sharing the same question. Everyone wanted to know who had quietly purchased one of the largest independent dealerships in the region. Richard Coleman checked his watch every few minutes while speaking with department supervisors. He had spent nearly 20 years managing the business, yet even he had never met the new owner. The only instructions he had received came through Naomi Carter's office. "Prepare the staff. Welcome the owner. Begin the future." Richard smiled confidently as another black luxury sport utility vehicle pulled into the front parking area. He straightened his jacket before realizing the driver was only another guest. "Not yet," he said quietly to himself. Nearby, Alicia Bennett walked through the showroom carrying a visitor badge one of her friends had arranged for her. She admired the polished floors, the rows of new trucks and sport utility vehicles, and the excitement filling the building. "I heard the buyer is worth a fortune," one employee whispered to another. "Someone said he owns businesses across 3 states, another replied. Alicia smiled to herself. That sounded much more like the picture of success she had always imagined. She quietly wondered what kind of luxury vehicle the new owner would choose for such an important entrance. Outside, reporters adjusted their cameras toward the main driveway. Every expensive sedan that appeared caused a brief wave of attention before fading into disappointment. Richard remained near the front doors greeting arriving guests with practiced confidence, but even he began to wonder whether the mysterious owner had changed plans. Then, at exactly 9 o'clock, a familiar dark gray pickup truck turned slowly into the dealership entrance. It drove at an ordinary speed, stopping near the visitor parking spaces instead of the reserved area marked owner arrival. A few employees barely looked up before returning to their conversations. One salesman laughed quietly. "Looks like somebody came to buy a work truck before the ceremony." Alicia glanced toward the parking lot and immediately recognized the pickup. Her expression tightened. "What is Marcus doing here?" she whispered under her breath. She watched as Marcus stepped out wearing dark jeans, polished brown boots, and a neatly pressed navy button-down shirt. He carried nothing except his stainless steel travel mug and a simple leather folder tucked beneath one arm. Alicia walked briskly toward him before he reached the entrance. "Marcus," she said in a low voice, "this is not the right time. There is an important event happening." Marcus smiled gently. "I know." Alicia looked around, worried someone she knew might recognize him. "Please do not embarrass yourself. Everyone is waiting for the new owner." Marcus remained completely calm. "So am I." Alicia sighed with visible frustration. "You cannot seriously believe you belong in this meeting." Before Marcus could answer, the front doors opened. Naomi Carter walked directly toward him with an easy smile and extended her hand without the slightest hesitation. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," she said clearly enough for several nearby employees to hear. "Everyone is assembled. They are waiting for you inside." Naomi Carter's greeting immediately changed the atmosphere around the entrance. Conversation slowed. Employees who had been preparing refreshments or arranging promotional materials quietly turned toward Marcus Bennett. Alicia stood completely still, searching Naomi's face for some sign that the attorney had mistaken him for someone else. None came. Naomi stepped aside with professional confidence and gestured toward the showroom entrance. "Everything is ready, Mr. Bennett," she said. "Richard Coleman and the department managers have assembled the entire staff." Marcus thanked her with a simple nod before taking another sip from his stainless steel travel mug. Nothing about his expression suggested he had just become the owner of one of the largest dealerships in the area. He walked toward the entrance with the same calm pace he used every morning. Alicia hurried beside him. "Marcus, what is happening?" she asked quietly. "Why is the attorney calling you Mr. Bennett?" Marcus looked at her briefly before returning his attention to the front doors. "You will understand soon enough." Alicia frowned. "Understand what?" Marcus smiled politely without answering. Richard Coleman noticed Naomi escorting Marcus toward the building and immediately walked forward with a welcoming smile. He extended his hand without hesitation. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. It is an honor to finally meet you in person." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate everything you have done to keep this dealership successful." Richard nodded respectfully. "The team is excited to hear your vision." Alicia stared at the exchange in complete disbelief. Only moments earlier she had assumed Marcus was interrupting an important event. Now the general manager himself was welcoming him with obvious respect. Around them, several employees exchanged confused glances. One salesman quietly whispered, "Is that really the new owner?" Another answered, "I thought he would arrive in a luxury sedan." Richard overheard the comment and smiled slightly. Apparently we all had something to learn today. Reporters near the entrance quickly redirected their cameras toward Marcus. The flashes from several photographs reflected across the showroom windows as Naomi opened the glass doors. Inside, more than 100 employees stood gathered between rows of new trucks and sport utility vehicles. Folding chairs filled the center of the showroom, while a small stage displayed the dealership logo behind a simple podium. The room gradually became silent as Marcus entered. Alicia remained near the back beside several visitors, unable to take her eyes off him. She remembered every joke she had made about his pickup, every comparison she had drawn between him and wealthier men, and every time she had treated that truck as proof he lacked ambition. Each memory now felt heavier than the last. Richard stepped onto the stage first and adjusted the microphone. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "Thank you for joining us for this important day in the history of our dealership." He paused long enough for the room to become completely quiet. For the past several weeks, many of us have wondered who would become our new owner. Like many of you, I imagined someone arriving with great fanfare and an expensive motorcade. A few people smiled politely. Richard looked toward Marcus before continuing. "Instead, I discovered something much more valuable. Real leadership does not always announce itself through appearances." He extended his arm toward Marcus with genuine respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce the new owner of this dealership, Mr. Marcus Bennett." The entire showroom broke into warm applause as every employee turned toward the quiet man who had arrived driving the same pickup truck that so many people had dismissed only minutes earlier. The applause continued for several long seconds before Marcus Bennett stepped calmly onto the stage. He placed his stainless steel travel mug on the podium shelf, adjusted the microphone only slightly, and waited patiently until the room became quiet again. His relaxed confidence immediately captured everyone's attention because it felt genuine rather than rehearsed. "Good morning," he began with an easy smile. "Thank you for being here, and thank you for welcoming me. I know today comes with a lot of questions, so I will start with the most important one. I did not purchase this dealership because I wanted another business. I purchased it because I believe people deserve to work for leaders who value character as much as performance." The employees listened in complete silence. Marcus looked across the showroom, making eye contact with people from every department instead of focusing only on the managers standing near the front. "Over the past several weeks, I have studied your customer satisfaction scores your community involvement, and your employee retention. I have also reviewed areas where we can improve. I am not here to erase everything that has been built. I am here to strengthen it. Richard Coleman smiled with quiet relief, while several department managers exchanged approving looks. Marcus continued, "Many businesses spend too much time chasing appearances. I prefer to invest in people, good decisions, and long-term trust. Those things usually produce better results than expensive first impressions." Alicia stood near the back of the showroom, unable to ignore how naturally Marcus spoke. She had heard him express similar ideas at home many times, but she had always dismissed them as excuses from someone who lacked ambition. Now those same principles were being received with respect by more than 100 employees, local business leaders, and members of the press. Marcus paused before continuing. "Beginning today, there will be no sudden layoffs, no dramatic restructuring, and no decisions based on ego. Every employee will have the opportunity to demonstrate his or her value. Performance, integrity, teamwork, and respect will determine the future of this organization." A wave of relieved whispers spread through the crowd. Several employees smiled openly, while others nodded with visible appreciation. Richard stepped forward and quietly said, "I believe everyone was hoping to hear exactly that." Marcus thanked him before reaching into the leather folder Naomi Carter had handed him the previous day. He removed a single document and held it up briefly. "This is not a list of people leaving," he explained. "It is a list of investments we will begin making over the next 12 months. Better technician training, improved customer service systems, updated equipment, and expanded employee development." Applause filled the showroom once again. Alicia looked around and realized the excitement in the room had nothing to do with Marcus becoming wealthy. It came from the confidence people already had in the way he intended to lead. She suddenly remembered mocking the very pickup truck that was still parked outside. The same truck Marcus had chosen to keep even after purchasing the dealership. Her face grew warm with embarrassment as she realized that every assumption she had made about success had been built on appearances instead of substance. As the applause gradually settled, Marcus closed the folder and looked toward Richard with a calm smile. "Now," he said, "before we celebrate this new beginning, I would like to spend the rest of the morning learning something far more important than sales numbers. I would like to meet every member of this team personally." For the next 2 hours, Marcus Bennett walked through every corner of the dealership without anyone announcing his arrival from one department to the next. He shook hands with technicians working in the service bays, introduced himself to receptionists answering customer calls, spoke with sales consultants on the showroom floor, and asked warehouse employees how long they had been with the company. Instead of asking people how much they sold, he asked what made their jobs harder than they should be. One technician explained that outdated diagnostic equipment slowed repairs. A receptionist mentioned that customers often became frustrated because they received inconsistent updates while waiting for service. A finance specialist suggested simplifying paperwork to save families valuable time. Marcus listened carefully, occasionally writing short notes inside a small leather notebook he carried in his shirt pocket. He promised nothing he could not deliver, yet everyone noticed that he listened far longer than he spoke. Richard Coleman followed several steps behind, watching employees gradually relax as they realized the new owner genuinely wanted to understand the business before changing it. "I have met a lot of executives," Richard admitted quietly as they paused near the service department. "Most spend their first day talking. You have spent yours listening." Marcus smiled. "People closest to the work usually understand the problems better than the people sitting in the biggest offices." Richard nodded with genuine respect. "That explains why they already trust you." Meanwhile, Alicia Bennett remained inside the showroom long after most visitors had left. She watched Marcus from across the building as employees approached him willingly, not because they had been instructed to do so, but because they seemed comfortable speaking with him. Every conversation challenged another assumption she had carried for years. She had believed successful people needed expensive symbols to command respect. Marcus had arrived in the same pickup she had mocked only days earlier, yet every person in the building now treated him with sincere admiration. During the afternoon, Naomi Carter joined Marcus inside a conference room where several department managers gathered around a large table. Financial reports, inventory summaries, and customer satisfaction data covered the polished wood surface. Naomi reviewed the transition schedule before sliding another folder toward Marcus. These are the projects approved for immediate investment, she explained. Marcus looked through each page carefully before signing the authorization forms one at a time. Employee training begins first, he said. If we improve our people, everything else improves with them. Derek Lawson, the sales director, leaned forward with curiosity. Most new owners focus on increasing profits immediately. Marcus closed the folder. Profits matter, but trust lasts longer. Customers remember how they were treated long after they forget the price they paid. Several managers quietly nodded in agreement. The meeting ended with renewed optimism as everyone returned to work carrying clear responsibilities for the months ahead. Late that afternoon, Marcus stepped outside into the warm Carolina sunshine and walked toward the familiar gray pickup waiting exactly where he had parked it that morning. Reporters had already left, and the parking lot had become almost empty. As he unlocked the driver's door, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. Alicia stopped a few feet away, her voice far quieter than it had been only 2 days earlier. "Marcus," she said carefully, "would you please give me a few minutes? There are some things I think I finally understand, and I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago." "Marcus." Bennett looked at Alicia for a quiet moment before setting his travel mug on the bed of his pickup. The late afternoon sun reflected across the dealership windows behind them, where a handful of employees were still finishing their day. "You have a few minutes," he said calmly. Alicia took a slow breath, searching for words that suddenly felt much harder to say than she had imagined. "I owe you an apology," she began. "Not because you own this dealership. Because I stopped seeing who you really were a long time ago." Marcus remained silent, giving her his full attention. "I kept measuring you against other people," she continued. "Their cars, their salaries, their houses. I convinced myself those things defined success, and I judged you every time you drove this truck." She glanced toward the pickup before lowering her eyes. "I thought you lacked ambition. I was wrong." Marcus leaned lightly against the truck. "What changed today?" Alicia smiled sadly. "Everything I believed about success fell apart the moment I watched more than 100 people respect you before they even knew how much money you had. They respected the way you listened, the way you spoke, and the way you treated everyone the same." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Respect earned through character lasts much longer than attention earned through appearances. Alicia looked at him with regret. "You tried to tell me that so many times." Marcus smiled gently. "I did. But sometimes people have to discover certain lessons for themselves." They stood quietly for several seconds while employees gradually left the building behind them. Several people waved toward Marcus as they drove away. He smiled and waved back to every one of them. Alicia noticed that none of those interactions felt forced. They came naturally because the employees already trusted the man they had met that morning. "I also realized something else," Alicia admitted. "You never tried to embarrass me today. You could have corrected me in front of everyone at the barbecue. You could have told me about the acquisition days ago. Instead, you stayed quiet." Marcus looked toward the dealership entrance before answering. "I was never interested in winning an argument. I was focused on completing something important the right way." Alicia slowly nodded. "I confused confidence with showing off. You never needed to prove anything." Marcus picked up his travel mug again. The people who truly know their value rarely spend much time trying to convince everyone else. Alicia felt tears gathering in her eyes, but she quickly brushed them away before they could fall. "Can you forgive me?" she asked softly. Marcus did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked once more at the dealership where employees continued locking doors and saying goodnight to one another. "Forgiveness is easier than rebuilding trust," he finally said. "Those are two different things." Alicia accepted his words without arguing because she knew they were true. At that moment, Richard Coleman walked outside carrying a folder he had forgotten inside. He smiled as he approached Marcus. "I wanted to thank you again," he said. "The team has not stopped talking about today. I have never seen morale improve this quickly." Marcus accepted the folder Richard handed him and smiled. "That is good to hear. Tomorrow we begin the real work." Richard nodded. "And I think everyone is ready to follow your lead." As Richard walked back toward his own vehicle, Alicia quietly watched him leave before turning toward Marcus once more. For the first time in years, she realized the greatest thing her husband had ever built was not the dealership standing behind them. It was the character that had made every person inside believe in him before they ever learned the size of his success. The drive home that evening was almost silent except for the steady sound of the pickup moving along familiar roads. Alicia Bennett sat in the passenger seat looking through the windshield instead of reaching for her phone as she usually did. Every few minutes, she glanced toward Marcus Bennett, hoping to begin another conversation, but each time she realized she had already said everything she needed to say. The difficult part was no longer admitting she had been wrong. The difficult part was accepting that trust could not be repaired with a single apology. When they arrived home, Marcus carried his travel mug inside, placed his keys in the ceramic bowl beside the front door, and went directly to the kitchen to prepare dinner just as he had done countless evenings before. Nothing about his routine had changed simply because his life had. Alicia watched quietly from the doorway before finally speaking. "Can I help?" Marcus looked up with a gentle smile. "Of course." She began setting plates on the table while Marcus finished preparing the meal. The silence between them no longer felt tense. Instead, it felt honest, as though both of them understood that rebuilding a relationship required patience rather than promises. During dinner, Alicia looked around the modest dining room she had criticized so many times. She remembered wishing for a larger house, newer furniture, and a different lifestyle. Now she realized Marcus had never been unable to provide those things. He had simply refused to measure happiness by them. "Were you ever going to tell me about the dealership?" she asked quietly. Marcus folded his napkin before answering. "Yes, after everything was finalized, and after the employees heard it from me first. They deserved certainty before rumors." Alicia slowly nodded. "I assumed you were hiding it because you did not trust me." Marcus met her eyes. "I was protecting a business transaction, not keeping a secret from my wife." That answer stayed with Alicia long after dinner ended. Later that evening, she walked into the garage alone. The pickup sat exactly where it always had, clean but ordinary, without polished chrome wheels or custom paint. She slowly ran her hand along the side of the truck, remembering every careless joke she had made about it. She finally understood that Marcus had never driven it because it was all he could afford. He drove it because it represented the kind of life he intentionally chose, one built on practicality instead of appearances. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the dealership before sunrise, greeting the maintenance crew as they unlocked service doors and prepared the showroom for another business day. Instead of parking in the reserved owner space near the entrance, he left his pickup in the same employee parking area where he had parked the day before. Several workers noticed and smiled. One technician walked over and said, "You know that owner's space is yours now." Marcus smiled warmly. "The walk gives me a chance to say good morning to everyone." The technician laughed. "That sounds exactly like something you would say." Throughout the morning, Marcus continued meeting with department leaders, reviewing employee suggestions, and approving improvements that would benefit both customers and staff. His decisions remained thoughtful and consistent, never rushed and never influenced by appearances. Just before lunch, Naomi Carter entered his office carrying another folder. She placed it on his desk with a satisfied smile. "The first employee improvement projects are ready for your signature," she said. "There is also one more item you should see. It came in this morning, and I believe it is personal." Marcus Bennett looked at the folder Naomi Carter had placed on his desk before opening it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter folded neatly into a single page. He immediately recognized Alicia's handwriting. Naomi noticed the expression on his face and quietly stepped toward the door. "I will give you some privacy," she said before leaving the office. Marcus unfolded the letter and began reading. Alicia had written that she finally understood the difference between looking successful and living with genuine purpose. She admitted that she had spent years measuring happiness through expensive possessions and comparing their life with everyone around them. She apologized not only for criticizing his pickup truck, but also for failing to appreciate the quiet integrity, patience, and consistency he had shown throughout their marriage. She ended the letter with a simple sentence that stayed with him long after he finished reading. "I hope one day I earn back the trust one was too careless to protect." Marcus folded the letter and placed it back inside the folder before looking through the office window toward the dealership floor. Employees were helping customers, technicians were moving efficiently through the service bays, and conversations carried an energy that had been missing only days before. The business was already moving forward, not because of dramatic changes, but because people believed they were building something worthwhile together. That evening, Marcus arrived home to find Alicia preparing dinner. She looked nervous as he walked into the kitchen. I was not sure if you had read it, she admitted. Marcus placed the folder gently on the counter. I did. Alicia waited quietly. Thank you for being honest, he said. It takes courage to admit when we have been wrong. She nodded slowly. I do not expect everything to be fixed overnight. Marcus smiled with quiet kindness. Neither do I. They shared dinner without discussing money, cars, or business. Instead, they talked about ordinary things they had not taken time to enjoy for months. The conversation felt lighter because it no longer revolved around proving anything. Over the following weeks, the dealership continued to grow. Employee satisfaction improved, customer reviews became stronger, and several of the training programs Marcus had approved produced immediate results. Richard Coleman often joked that the biggest improvement had come from an owner who spent more time listening than giving speeches. Marcus continued parking his pickup in the employee lot every morning despite repeated offers to reserve a closer space. Whenever someone asked why, he always gave the same answer. Walking through the building reminds me who makes this place successful. The employees appreciated that he never asked them to live by standards he refused to follow himself. At home, Alicia slowly rebuilt trust through everyday actions instead of promises. She stopped comparing their life with anyone else's and began appreciating the values Marcus had quietly demonstrated all along. She eventually realized that the old pickup sitting in their garage had never represented a lack of success. It represented freedom from needing other people's approval. Months later, as Marcus locked the dealership for the evening, he smiled when he saw the familiar gray pickup waiting under the setting Carolina sky. It looked exactly the same as it always had, yet he knew the real change had never been the truck, the dealership, or even the business itself. The greatest transformation had happened in the hearts of the people who finally learned that true success is never measured by the vehicle someone drives, but by the character they carry with them every single day.